started, Interwomanhood was supposed to be a social platform where we could discuss matters pertaining to women and women's health and hygiene. And for this particular month, I wanted to tackle menstrual health and hygiene. So my original goal, as I have said, was to engage women and girls. I had targeted 16 to 25 women and girls who are most active on social media, especially here in my country. For those of you that don't know, I am Kenyan. So the social media platform that is most popular for this age bracket was Instagram. So that was where I did launch myself. I did not go too much on Twitter or on Facebook. So the aim was to spread information about women's reproductive health and hygiene in a bid to curb misinformation. So we wanted to provide accurate and useful information and to create a community where people feel comfortable talking about these issues and seeking help where it was necessary. So why did I decide to go this route? I wanted, personally, after having not enough information growing up, my mother did try her best, and for that I am grateful, but there's more information that I wished I did have, especially growing up and realizing that I don't get my period after every 28 days. Sometimes my period just doesn't show up. And it was a bit confusing for me at that time. And I felt it was very important for all of us to have at least that idea, that information, which is very vital, but which is not what we get. Sorry, backing. So my aim was, of course, once again, I have said, was to use popular social media platforms. And I also wanted to use a well-curated blog, which was going to have articles, not just from me, myself, informative articles, but I also wanted it to have personal, sorry, I'm trying to think of that word. Not coming to my mind right now. So I wanted it to have professional information from people who work in that particular sector in women's reproductive health and hygiene, as well as personal information, people's personal experiences. I also wanted it to have a podcast. Now, this was all part of my original idea. So what was I able to do so far? I was able to set up my Instagram and Facebook pages, that is at intowomanhood_KE, as well as set up my podcast players and develop my blog. However, even though I did set up all of these initial stages, which was during my first week, I was only able to launch my social media page. And so far I was able to get 30 plus followers within my 3 weeks of being active. I had targeted 50, but I was actually very impressed by my 30 because my 30 were a very interactive bunch of people, the target demographic that I had initially wanted to go for. And it felt very nice having those 30 that were very interactive. So for me, it really did help, even though they were not the 50 that I was targeting. So the outcome of my work so far was being able to tackle 4 different topics. Like I mentioned, this month I was tackling menstrual health and hygiene. May is also the month where we talk more about menstrual health, hygiene, and period poverty. So I wanted my work to be central. So those 4 different topics, I tackled one each week. I did this tackling by, it was a 2-pronged approach. So I did have my Instagram posts, which gave more educational content. And I did have my Instagram stories, which were more of an interactive based content. So we wanted to find out the history of these topics, where we have come from previously. We also wanted to see busting myths, what is true, what is false, what are commonly perceived notions versus what we have. I'll be sure to show you how that works later on in the presentation. So these topics that I tackled were menstruation, the basics of menstruation, irregular periods, food and exercise, what people say about food and exercise. I also had menstrual products, which I divided into reusable and non-reusable. Here in Kenya, we are very much into the non-reusable products, that is especially pads. They're more widely distributed, more widely available, although we are seeing a bit more new entrants into the market, although they're not as new, perhaps they're just becoming more widespread. That is the menstrual cup. We still have a bit of tension surrounding tampons. They're not as popular in our country because of misinformation and bias, something I came to recently realize. We also tackled period pain, how previously our association of pain, how women's pain, especially when it comes to menstruation, has been taken. And we also just recently talked about period poverty, coming to the pinnacle of the completion of the 4-month initiative, where we were celebrating Menstrual Health Day yesterday. I was also able to set up the interactive Tuesday and Thursday sessions, which is something that I have talked about to discuss just the topic of the week, delving into previous history and addressing any myths. So what goals did I miss? I definitely missed some of my targets, which was in terms of followers, episodes released, and blog articles released. But I'm glad that I was able to kickstart the project. Now, I had planned on starting a blog article as well as podcasting, but as I was working more into my project by the second week, I realized even though I did want to start a podcast, I felt like I did not have a very structured approach to it. I did not know what I was going to be I knew what I was going to be discussing. I just didn't see how the format would fit in. And I felt instead of releasing lackluster work or work that I felt was not up to par with what exactly I wanted it to be, I would just rather hold off and talk to more people within that sector, within that industry who have been doing it longer than me, because this kind of platform is not very new here in the country. But I did find some people who are very open to discussing it with me. My blog articles, I was able to set up my blog. And for a while, I also felt like I was writing, but I felt like it was coming out a bit jargon-y. So I decided to do more research on that, which is why those two different platforms of mine were halted. And I decided to go straight ahead with the social media aspect, which was something that I was more familiar with, and changing the redirection for me was relatively easier. That also brings me to the redirection, which is how I decided to change my plan for the project, which, although I did change the plan, I was able to maintain its objectives. And this meant delaying blog and podcast launch, but maximizing social media interactions, something that I am actually quite glad I did. What lessons have I learned so far? So during these 4 weeks, I did learn 4 very important things. One is that research is very important. I did have the idea to start those 3 platforms, my social media, my blog, and my podcast, but I did not do proper research on the podcasting aspect of it. I do podcasts for my financial literacy programs, but I did not know how that would translate to something as dynamic and as culturally sensitive as menstruation is here in my country. So that is something that I wish I would have delved deeper into, because financial literacy and menstrual health and hygiene are 2 very different things that require 2 different approaches. Second is that content creation is very dynamic, and it's important to change and keep up with one's audience. Luckily, this is something that I was able to learn early in advance that allowed me to pivot my approaches. Managing too many content platforms is not feasible. I realized that when I was trying to handle both Facebook and Instagram. I'm not very good on Facebook, so I decided to just hold on that particular platform. Community engagement with other people in the same field is vital and helpful. And I'm so grateful that I was able to interact with other people within the same community. We have different platforms here in Kenya. We have the Heals for Pads, who tackle period poverty. We have Inwadada who tackle menstrual health and hygiene in marginalized communities. We also have Sister Dreams. These are different initiatives that were started by different people. And I'm so glad that these people have inducted me into their circle and have been willing to talk to me more about community engagement, about how they have been able to transform their projects to fit into the different niches that they have. So having that kind of community has been especially helpful. The key challenges that I faced, like I mentioned before, was coming up with a format for both my my blog posts and my podcast segments. As someone who thrives on organization, I could not go into this unorganized. And for some time, I felt like I wasn't doing my best, so I just decided to halt. Like I said, it's not something that I had previously visualized or done enough research on, so I decided to stop. I tackled them by just deciding to delay the setup, realizing that it's okay to delay until you are able to create something and put it out there, that's something that you're proud of. So I was able to come with a writing format that works, that is still underway. Like I said, my blog website is actually done and dusted, but it's not yet released to the public because there is no content on that particular platform. What did I enjoy most about this project? I enjoyed coming up with project ideas and topics to cover. I did this with the help of some of my friends. So this was quite the entertaining thing to do. It was very interesting listening to their points of view and their perspectives, especially as coming up with these project ideas. Because I also talked to some of my friends who have been doing social work, especially geared towards period poverty. It was also fun creating the more interactive content because I got to talk to people, I got to interact with people, I got to see the myths and the truths that we hold, especially when it comes to menstruation, as not just as women, but even as a community, even those of us who live in urban areas, still, surrounded by these myths. I also got to interact with them, something that I've just mentioned, and getting to learn from people that I was following. Like I said, it's a very close-knit community and it's a very welcoming community that has enabled me to see how exactly this transition can happen. It has allowed me to pivot my work from what I had originally wanted it to be to become something bigger. They have allowed me to dream big, and I am very grateful for that induction. Do I plan on continuing with this project? Absolutely, 100%. But my first aim will be to cut down my project, like I have mentioned, to only cover just Instagram, no Facebook. For me, I've realized it's not only not feasible for me, but my target audience is not as active on that particular platform. I'm planning to launch my blog, hopefully by mid of next month, with several blog articles. I also got my guest articles. So while I have them on my computer, they're not yet released. With this, I believe my content load will be a bit easier to maneuver. So it will also allow me to do a bit more, interact a bit more, get to know what my audience wants to see from me, get to know how to navigate that as well. But my podcast idea is on hold. At the moment, I'm not even sure if I want to proceed with it, but I am open to the idea of seeing it later on, perhaps if I have a more concrete format to it. And that is it. Allow me just a minute to see if I can show you something interesting.